We're actually going to start the calling to order the the Board of Finance meeting. The first thing I need to do is that I'm going to be declaring that the Board of Education as a whole will constitute the Board of Finance. First item up then would be to elect a president of the Board of Finance. Nominations are open.
I nominate Todd.
Second.
We don't have Todd here anymore. Oh, you mean me?
I changed my mind.
I was hoping to get out of it. Any other nominations? Motion and second to elect me, I guess, as the president of the Board of Finance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we had, that was Kevin doing that. Next, we need to elect a a secretary to the Board of Finance.
I nominate Matt. Second.
Motion and second to nominate, to elect Matt as the secretary of the Board of Finance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now the report on investments and review the investment policy by Dr. Kuhn.
So as part of the legal requirements that we have to meet for the Board of Finance meeting, one of them is to look at the yearly investments and our investment policy. Last year I spoke on this. We do not have an investment policy. That is something that originally kind of gave to Todd a little bit to work on. We just never got anywhere with it. So that will probably be something that we'll need to look at doing as far as the policy is concerned. As far as investments, the only thing that we receive back in return is just interest from our money that sits in our bank accounts. And so this shows you what that looks historically. The rate of interest this year varied from 1.39% to 0.2%. I actually got put, I think it was back in July, kind of when things were happening and interest was starting to really decrease. I talked to the bank and we came to an agreement to put a floor level on there, and that floor level was to the 0.2%. So it's not going to go any lower than that for right now. That they said they'll reevaluate every year. But you can see this year, for 2020, the total amount of interest earned was about $58,000. Then you can compare that. 2019 was a pretty good year. 2018 was a decent year, but we've had years that we've hardly earned any interest. And that's all dependent on how much money is in the bank and what the rate is at that time. And so it varies from month to month. And so our total amount of interest that we earned for 2020 was $58,000. Any questions with that?
Money in the bank is all money that's in transactional state. Right?
Yep.
Let's move on to the 2020 financial report then.
Okay, so another requirement then is to, and this is something just within the past 2 years, is to give kind of a financial report on the past year. So we're kind of looking at 2020, maybe looking a little ahead into 21, but we'll go over some things here that are required as part of the report. And so we can kind of skip through some of those beginning slides. One of the things that we'll start off with here is what is our budget for 2021. I gave you a budget estimate of 2021. That was something that we had to approve and then submit to the Department of Local Government and Finance. They review that based off of anticipated revenue and expenses, and they determine whether or not that we have those funds or appropriations, I should say, to spend. So when we're talking about dollars here with the budget, we're talking in terms of appropriations. So those aren't actual dollars, those are just dollars that we're allowed to spend for this year, okay? So with the education fund, we published and estimated the 14.3 million. It came back to be that. which is good. So we didn't have to lose any appropriations when it came to the education fund. I gave you a comparison of what we spent in 2020, just to kind of give you an idea of how that appropriation lines up with what we actually spent in 2020. Operations, we estimated, sent in, published $8.8 million. DLGF reduced that appropriation to 7.4. And then there's the actual expenditures in 2020. Debt service, health, and rainy day health, which then shows the total differences between what was submitted back in September, I believe that's when we did our budget hearing, to what the actuals would be for 2021. So as a comparison, I'm a visual person. There's a graph that shows what our budget estimated breakdown was for those funds. How much of that was for education, how much of that was for operation, debt, and rainy day. And then based off of the appropriation reduction, very similar in that, so not much changes as far as that comparison is concerned. When we look at expenses of the education fund, there was no reduction of appropriations, so it really is very same as what we initiated back in September. This gives you a good breakdown. If you go to the next slide, Mike, gives you a good breakdown of those categories. So you can see that our budget, about 90% of our budget is spent on salary and benefits when it comes to the education fund. And then the other categories, other big ticket categories then would be things that we pay as part of our Heartland agreement, and then supplies and materials, and then part of our White's agreement as well. Now we get into the operation fund a little bit. I'm not going to go on this. This is a hyperlink that you can click on, and it gives you a historical breakdown of tax rates and levies and those type of things, but it's numerical. So it takes some time to dive through and look at, but you always have access to that if you want to look at it from a historical perspective. You can click on that hyperlink. So when we're dealing with operation fund, we like to understand and know what our assessed valuation is going to be. We had a slight increase of our assessed valuation for 2021, about 0.5%. It's better to go up than down because your assessed valuation drives your tax rate, right? And so having a higher assessed valuation can offset our tax rate a little bit and keep it at a lower level. Go ahead, Mike, please. That's just a historical picture. This is what I found interesting. I think it was back in October or November, we had policy analysts come in and kind of do a forecast a little bit of what our assessed valuation and tax rates could potentially look like out into the future. And so, for 2021, they showed a assessed valuation of $722 million. And when you compare that to what we actually were, we were $721,814,000. So it's pretty close to that. So this blue line kind of just represents a future trend, possibly with our assessed valuation. The orange line is something that I asked them to do just in case there was a lot of unknowns. There still is a lot of unknowns to how COVID-19 might impact property values and those type of things down the road. But that blue line is kind of what the baseline is for our assessed valuation. I mentioned before, our assessed valuation drives our tax rates a little bit. This is a historical perspective of those tax rates for MSD of Wabash County with the breakdown to what those tax rates serviced. So you can see back in 2019, legislation combined those bus replacement levies, those capital fund levies, those transportation levies into an operational fund or an operation levy, which represents the entire green column there. And then the peach column would represent your debt service. So you can see we've kind of hovered around the 86, 88 cent range. And if you really got interested, you could compare that to those assessed valuations, and you can see where there were dips in the assessed valuation, where your tax rates increased a little bit. When there was an increase in assessed valuations, your tax rates dipped a little bit. So that's where some of that dipping and going comes. And then I get this graph off of a software that I use, 2021. They just published 2021 into Gateway, so that wasn't ready for this time. So that's what that bar line represents up there at the top, is the 2021 current tax rate. I like to show this just to see how we compare to other corporations and statewide. The average statewide is about $1.01 when you're looking at tax rates. That's from 2019. Haven't really found any more recent information than that at this point. Larry DuBois, I don't know if many of you guys know him. He actually retired this year, but he's still going to be giving presentations to local governments and IASBO and some of those groups. So it'll be nice to have his wisdom and knowledge around for that. This also came from Policy Annex. It relates to that 2019 median average. So at 80 cents, you can see that we're right there towards the top as being one of the lowest in the state for tax rates. Net assessed valuations, like I mentioned before, drive your tax rate dollars a little bit. Again, this was a projection that Policy Analytics presented to us back in October, and you can see their estimate for 2021 was almost right on to what our actuals were. I think our actual was 87.77, so very close there with that. And then you can see for 2022 a slight increase, probably because there's a little bit of dip in assessed valuation from their projection. And then you can see it fall way off, and the reason that it falls way off is because we would have retired all of our bonds at that point in time from our debt service, which would be our last payment would come in 2022. This year we'll have one bond that will pay off at the end of the year, which would leave us with 2 remaining bonds that get paid off at the end of 2022. This is recent information presented back in December from Larry DuBois, just showing that bond interest rates are at the lowest that they've been in a long, long, long time, less than 2.5%. Who knows, with the new president coming in and anything that happens with legislation and so forth, obviously some of those things could change in the future. But right now, it's pretty low. Lastly, I like to do a comparison around our border schools, just to kind of see what our tax rates were. Again, this is from 2020, so this isn't the most updated version because that was just released to Gateway today. But comparatively to last year, you can see where MSD of Wabash County stands from a tax rate perspective. This year, that would obviously represent 88 cents. We do know that just comparatively from the county, because we did receive the county budget order as well, that Wabash City Schools for 2021 will be $1.65, and Manchester's would be $1.06. The bar graph on the right is just a side-by-side comparison to give you how much money is collected based off of that tax rate. So it's the levy. And so, for example, like if you would compare MSD to Peru, we get about the same amount of money for levy, but they have a tax rate of $1.61, and we had a tax rate of 80 or 85 cents. So assessed valuation really drives that. Again, they have a lower assessed valuation. We have a much higher assessed valuation, and that's where that factor comes in. Which then leads to the money that we appropriated for the operation fund budget. This is what we submitted to the DLGF back in September. It gives you a breakdown of what those different categories are. You can see general administration, that would be like central office dealings, marketing and communication, technology, maintenance and custodial, security services would be like our SROs, insurance costs, property insurance, workman's comp, auto insurance, transportation costs, building, land, those are improvements. And then you have sports facilities and equipment purchases in there as well, which building, land, and equipment purchase can also have repairs and some of that stuff in there as well as maintenance. And so with the new budget order for our operation or appropriations for operations, this is the breakdown in that. And if you compare those, the biggest difference is typically when appropriations are reduced, then we don't typically spend as much money on projects. That's where the bonds have come in handy the past few years, is that we've had bond money to be able to do those types of things. Any questions with the budget then breakdown from that? And I put in your board packet the 1782 notice, which gives you a little bit more information. That's what we get from the DLGF with that.
Did you expect the DLGF to cut back operations about what they did?
Yeah, they do that every year, and a lot of that is because
About the same.
part of the process is that we over appropriate so that we make sure that we don't put ourselves in a bind because we don't ever know what our assessed valuation is going to be, and we don't want to put ourselves in a position to not receive enough money to fund our budget.
The 105,000 tax cap, that was expected about that number too.
That's the estimate, yeah.
That is an estimate.
Yes, that is an estimate. I don't even know what our actuals were from last year yet. The last part that we have to go through is the school corporation fiscal indicators. So back in 2019, part of legislation required a new entity to be created called the DUAB, which is the Distress Units Appeal Board. And they were to come up with some fiscal indicators and share those out publicly of every school corporation to determine some categories that might end up leading a district into financial distress. And a lot of that has to do because of the issues and the takeover of Muncie schools and Gary community schools. And so this is a fairly new process. It's only been out for a couple years. One thing to remember about this, though, these indicators, is that they are always a year behind. So these do not represent end of 2020 school year. They represent end of 2019 school year. And then next year's will represent the end of 2020. So it's always a year behind with that. So one of the things they look at is your ADM, because that's the money that we get from the state per student. And so obviously if there's a decrease in enrollment, that could lead to financial distress because of the schools not getting as much revenue from the state. So ADM is one thing that they look at. The other thing they look at are fund balances. And so what I shared with this is, and you can go on there on this website and you can play around with it if you choose. But this represents, I just broke it down into a few categories. Capital funds, which is the orange, that represents the bond money that we've received. And so obviously you can see where it's gone up and we've been spending it down because it's kind of a one-time thing that you get and you receive that money and you spend it. So the capital funds represent those bond dollars. Education fund and general fund, those are kind of the same thing. They're not really the same thing, but you can kind of equate that because we don't have a general fund anymore. It's now the education fund. So you can see where we were in the past with those in the negatives. And obviously we've improved our balances when it comes to the education fund. Operation fund is the gray. And you can also see that our operation fund is getting stronger. Rainy day, which is the yellow, and you can see that we're starting to build up a little bit of rainy day reserves. And then the brown is the self-insurance fund. And the only reason I wanted to put that on there was because today will be a day that we will celebrate for a little bit. And we ran into some issues back in the past with our self-insurance fund, and we will have that paid off after this board meeting. So that will be a good thing. The other thing they look at is your revenues and expenses for each year. So this is an example of the education fund revenue and expenses from year to year. Green representing the revenue, blue representing the expenditures. Obviously, if your blue is higher than your green, you're losing money, right? Because you're spending more than you're receiving, which is not always a bad thing, but if you do it a lot, then you're gonna dwindle down your reserves. Next slide. They look at a fund balances as percentages of expenditures. You can look through different funds. This is the education. I just selected the education fund, so we didn't have to go through all these different slides. But education shows that we have a 50% fund balance as a percent of our expenditures. And I think at one point, we used to have a goal of that, and I think it was like 12 or 15%. So we're doing well there. And then the annual deficit surplus, this just shows you revenues and expenses for all funds that hit our banks, not just the education fund. The last two is revenue by type. So that just gives you a breakdown of where the revenue streams are coming from year to year and what those look like. And then the last slide is an operating referendum, which, Mike, if you go back, which we don't have, we've never had an operating referendum, so there's nothing to see with that. I created this graph. I like to see it. I don't know if you guys really care to it. The blue lines represent our basic grant comparative to our ADM. So basic grant are the dollars that we receive per student. So you can see from the line graph as our ADM, you can see how that has impacted or adjusted our basic grant dollars that we receive from the state. And then I tie that into the total revenue for the education fund and the total expenses for the education fund. And then lastly, this just shows you again a historical perspective of our fund balances. You kind of already saw that on the other graph. I mentioned food service because that's one thing that we kind of keep an eye on, because that's changes from year to year all the time and so forth. And then lastly, last year we created a 2-year goal. So that goal goes through this year. So I'm just carrying that goal over. And so we had established a goal that we wanted our education fund balance to be equivalent or better than 3 months of expenses. And our average expenses per month for 2019 was 1.1 million. And our average for 2020 was about 1.2 million. So 3 months of that, we'd be looking at about $3.6 million balance that we would like to maintain in our education fund. And I believe currently our education fund sits at about $6 million. So we're good in a good direction with that. Our other goal was to increase our rainy day fund up to $1 million. I believe after we made that transfer back in October from operations to rainy day, when we take out the $500,000 to pay off our self-insurance today, that will leave us just over $1 million in our rainy day fund. And then the last was to pay off that self-insurance fund by this year. And so we'll have that done as well today. So that being said, I don't think I have to come to any more board meetings.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think I can take the rest of the year off, right? So that's just a financial recap then of 2021 leading us into 2020 leading us into 2021. Any questions with that?
I just want to say I appreciate your guys' leadership on being able to have us hit every one of those financial goals. When I first started on the board, that seemed impossible. So, good job.
Thank you. So I guess that would conclude.
Yep,
the
so we
adjourn-
are
adjourn that one.
adjourning the the Board of Finance meeting. So we'll move right on to the reorganization meeting, and I will call that to order. Recognize the visitors in the room are mostly just employees. No revisions to the agenda for the reorganization meeting. And so we'll move on to the oath of office for the new board members and re-elected board members. So go ahead, Steve.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Rosine, if you would stand and raise your right hand. Yes, okay. I, Christian Rosine,
I, Christian Rosing,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
support the Constitution of the United States of America,
and the Constitution of the State of Indiana,
Constitution of the State of Indiana,
and the laws of the United States and the State of Indiana.
laws of the United States and of Indiana.
I will faithfully execute the duties of my office.
Can you repeat that, please?
I will faithfully execute
Faithfully execute
the duties of my office
the duties of my office,
as a member of the school board of school trustees.
member of the school board of trustees.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Bowman. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Kevin Bowman,
I, Kevin Bowman,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Indiana
and the Constitution of the State of Indiana
and the laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and the State of Indiana.
and the State of Indiana.
I will faithfully execute the duties of my office
I will faithfully execute the duties of my office
as a member of this school board.
as a member of the school board.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Mr. Hall. Stand. Raise your right hand. I, Scott Halpert,
I, Scott Halpert,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
of America
of America
and the Constitution of the State of Indiana
and the Constitution of the State of Indiana
and the laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and the State of Indiana.
and the State of Indiana.
I will faithfully execute the duties of my office
I will faithfully execute the duties of my office
as a member of this school board.
as a member of the school board.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. You're official.
All
right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Catch you later. Bye-bye. I'll
And
get
now-
this to Cheryl. I'll get copies to Cheryl, and I will file these with the clerk.
Okay.
Office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the reorganization of the Board of Education. First item is election of president.
Todd.
Second.
Any other nominations? We have a motion and second to elect me as the president of the Board of Education. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Election of vice president.
I nominate Kevin. A second.
I have a motion and a second to elect Kevin as the vice president for the board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Election of secretary.
Nominate Matt Driscoll. Second.
There's a motion and a second to elect Matt as the secretary for the Board of Education. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Legislative liaison delegate to the Indiana School Board Association Annual Convention.
I nominate Todd.
Is that in person this year, or is that still?
Well, it won't be until this fall, so we don't.
I know, so we don't know yet, okay.
I second.
I will motion in a second to nominate me as the legislative liaison delegate to the ISBA convention. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I guess I'll do it. Representative to the Heartland Career Center Board of Managers.
Nominate Matt Driscoll.
A motion and second for Matt being the representative to the Heartland Board of Managers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next is the appointment of the corporation attorney and establish a retainer of $175 an hour.
And, Mr. President, I will recommend we approve the law office of Downs, Tandy, and Petunio. There we go. As attorneys at the rate of $175 per hour.
We negotiate that.
That's a no.
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve those guys to be the office of to be the corporation attorney and to establish that retainer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointment of corporation treasurer and deputy treasurer with current bond set at $200,000, elementary bookkeepers current bond set at $10,000, and high school bookkeepers for $20,000.
Mr. President, I recommend the appointment of Dr. Chris Kuhn as corporation treasurer, and I also recommend Laura Bear as deputy treasurer, and the bonds that you actually read.
Okay, we don't, okay, the bookkeeper bonds are, yeah,
They're not tied to a name or
Right,
tied to
right.
a position.
to a position.
Position,
Okay.
right? I guess I should read that, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and second to appoint Dr. Kuhn as the corporation treasurer and Laura Bear as the deputy treasurer, and to approve all of the bond amounts that previously read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is to establish the salary of board members.
The current salary of the board members is $2,000, with the Heartland Career Center representative receiving an additional $25 per meeting, not to exceed 12 meetings, so the maximum salary cannot exceed $2,000. That's my recommendation, and that's by Indiana code.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to establish the salary of the board members. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Establish a mileage reimbursement rate.
And I recommend the mileage rate for all school employees be the same as the amount in the current teacher master contract, which is 44 cents per mile.
So.
Second.
We have a motion and second to establish a mileage reimbursement rate for the school district employees. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Board scholarship.
Yes, since 1994, the board has been very generous in giving a contribution for 2 scholarships. And so each board member contributed $120 annually toward 2 $300 scholarships, one each at Northwood and Southwood. And so the board selects the recipients from the applications submitted each spring. So that would be up to you if you would want to continue that, but we appreciate what you've done in the past.
What did we raise that to last year?
It was a $200 scholarship. We went to $250, I believe, which
I think that's what it was.
represented, no, it went from 200 to 300.
300,
That's what he just said.
I did say
200.
300. This is the one that we did
This
last
is
year.
current,
Yeah,
yes.
current.
we went from 200 to 300. So
Yes.
instead of $100 from each board member, it's a $120 donation from each board member. So you want to keep it at 300?
That's fine with me, I have no problem. I was a little disappointed that we only had one applicant in the south part of the district, didn't we? But could have been a tiny thing.
Yeah, and there were only about 5 or 6 from the north, I think.
I just realized I'll probably get stuck in the south.
It's not hard.
Well, I like to get told.
And we're going to ask them all
Well,
just
if
as
only
a,
one applied, you did.
It's easy, huh?
as a project next year, we'll have the senior class write one for, I mean, they'll do it.
Everybody.
Yeah, so then that's- and you won't be disappointed in it.
Good luck with that reading.
I'll move to approve the $300.
Second.
Motion and second to approve a $300 per school. Board scholarship presented each spring. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointment of a local education agency officer, the LEA officer.
And Mr. President, I recommend that the board appoints the superintendent of MSD of Wabash County as the local education officer for the ensuing ensuing year, with authority to file applications for federal funds on behalf of the school corporation.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second to appoint Mr. Kefeber as the LEA officer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Select newspapers for legal advertisements.
So by law, we are required to place legal advertisements in our county newspaper. I recommend that we, or you officially approve the Wabash Plain Dealer. And again, just to let you know, it has to be a paid subscription, and that's the only paper that we have.
Did you ever get any traction with doing it? You were wanting to do it electronically, remember?
Yeah, there's still some traction on that. There's some of the requirements have been taken away, but actually it's made it almost more difficult.
So then you have
Chris
to
can
do-
talk about
You have
that.
to do a different form to advertise it in the paper and you still have to advertise it in the paper, but you have to do 2 different forms now instead of just doing one and advertising in both places, so it didn't really help.
Yeah, a lot of lobbyists that make a lot of money to continue to do it in print, so.
I'll move that we approve the Plain Dealer as an official publication.
Second.
Motion and second to select Wabash Plain Dealer as the newspaper for our legal advertisements. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then we need to approve the continued participation in the WMAP in Heartland Career Center.
I do recommend that continued collaboration with those 2 entities.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to approve continued participation in the Wabash Miami area program and the Heartland Career Center. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have anything else? It says other here, but I didn't know there was something we were missing.
No.
Okay, so the reorganization meeting is adjourned.
I guess the other thing was, though, you already hit the gavel, but if we want to do anything else different as far as our timing with board meetings or anything like that, so.
Keep that in mind, and as we get to items from board members, we'll bring that back up again in our next.
Yeah, we can discuss it.
Okay. Okay, so now we actually get to the regular meeting, and so at that point, we're going to stand and say the pledge. For those of you who've been here, the flag is now behind me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so future board meetings, January 26th, February 9th, and February 23rd are all regular meetings. Those will be held here. And on February 18th, we have the public work session.
January 18th.
January 18th, we have the public work session here at 1. We have no revision to the agenda. And so we'll move on to public recognition. We have a recommendation to approve a $3,000 donation for Southwood High School. 1,500 of it for Southwood and 1,500 of it from Northfield High School from First Farmers Bank and Trust. A recommendation to approve a $100 donation from Ernest and Barbara Ball for the art program at Southwood Elementary. A recommendation to approve 1,225 donation, 250 from Robert and Claudia May, 100 from Jennifer and Stan Cox, 200 from Amy Kuhn, $50 from Randolph and Barbara Swanson, $100 from Morris and Carol Smedley, $25 from John and Paula McDonald, 25 from Billy and Linda Seif, $50 from Catherine Baker, $25 from Marlia Mann, $250 from John and Diane Coldren, $100 from Troy and Stacy Bear, $50 from Joel and Connie Roberts, all in the memory of Kathy Seif for Northfield Athletic Department. Also have a recommendation to approve a $40 donation from Wabash County Farm Bureau for Southwood FFA. A recommendation to approve, you got a couple set of zeros in that. Is that $130 or is she giving us $130,000? I'm gonna guess $130. $30 from Aaron and Amy Rosine, $100 from Ron and Rhonda Bear, all in the memory of Kathy Seif for Northfield Athletic Department. Recommendation to approve a $75 donation from Tim Quinn for Northfield girls basketball, and a recommendation to approve the $40 donation from Wabash County Farm Bureau for Northfield FFA. My, is that a lot of money?
I move to accept donations.
Yeah,
A motion and a second to accept all those very generous donations. Your help has been greatly appreciated. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? School recognition.
All right, well, thank you. We'll start with Mr. Martin, who's on the list. That'll be first.
Appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about some good things kids are doing at Sharp Creek Elementary. First, we'd like to recognize the Sharp Creek Elementary Spelling Bee winners, which Mrs. Wynn provided. 5th grade winners for the Kiwanis contest. The winner was Colin Beal, and runner-up Nate Hudson. 6th grade Kiwana winner was Nicole Fisher, and the runner-up was Emma Wilson. And the Journal Gazette winner, Rihanna Poe, and runner-up Kiana Stevens. So congratulations to all those kids. We'd also like to recognize the hard work and the effort and skill and ability of our Sharp Creek Elementary paw print newspaper staff. They produce a newspaper once a month under the guidance of Mrs. Pam Campbell. And these students are Allison Edmonds, Ashlyn Macy, Sage Martin, Dawson Teixeira, and Hayden Copeland. And we just appreciate what they're doing. They electronically produce that, goes to all of our students and staff through electronic mail. And also want to mention one staff member, Mrs. Becky Mast. Just want to thank her for her extra time and help in providing homework help opportunities for our students 2 days a week after school. And it is taken advantage of, and parents and students and teachers appreciate her time with our students, helping them have success.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. Kefever. I'd like to recognize Gary DeGrandchamp, who will be retiring at the end of this month. Gary has served as our, basically we call it the transitions room, where kids are getting close to exiting campus. We put them in Gary's room, and Gary's there to help them earn any final credits they might be able to piece together. And so one of the things all of our kids tend to struggle with is math. Gary is a math whiz bang. And there's a lot of kids that would not have graduated if it had not been for Gary's help in math. So we want to wish Gary well for his retirement. He's done a great service for our students, and we hope he enjoys his January. We've tried to help we've tried to make that, honestly, we've tried to help make that possible for him. So thanks to Gary. And then a student I want to recognize, his name's Quincy. As you may know, for really about 4 weeks, end of November, start of December, our students were on quarantine in their cottages. And so we were able to deliver all their computers to their cottages so the house parents could have school during the day. I'm sure it won't shock you. Some students don't thrive in that setting. Quincy did. Quincy was one of the kids, and he kept his nose down. He kept shooting off questions to teachers, which they can do with an Edmonton. And he did a fantastic job. So Quincy is getting now moved to Mr. D's room because he's getting close to graduation. So we want to recognize Quincy for doing work when it's not easy to do work when you're just quarantined in the cottage. You would think it would be, but it's not. So Quincy's done a great job.
a lot of distractions that can be in homes and cottages, wherever, so it's great that he did that. Mrs. Boone had a conflict tonight, so she is not here, so she will not be mentioning anything right now, except I think I will say something later. Mrs. Moore is here. She's more to talk a little more about our new business with our preschool, but she also put some things down. So Mrs. Moore, why don't you go ahead and share?
Just the one.
Oh, one down, I see, yeah.
We'd just like to thank Bachelor Creek Church of Christ. They contacted me right after Thanksgiving break, that there are members in their congregation wanting to adopt some families for students that may not have the resources that they need. And they adopted 4 of our families that were not getting any other type of community help. So they hadn't signed up for Christmas Spirit and maybe missed that deadline. Or I think that deadline comes out right after school starts. So parents whose situations may have changed. They adopted 4 families impacting 11 kids, and we're just very thankful. They were there for our kids and their families, and the responses that I had from parents whose children received was just overwhelming. Just super appreciative that they were able to help provide for their kids.
That's
Thanks,
great.
Bachelor Creek.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew McDaniel had a couple here. Says the Southland community would like to recognize Alex Farr, grade 12, for his selection as a rising star for White's Residential and Family Services by the MBA All-Star Legacy Committee. This award comes with a $2,100 scholarship to a college of Alex's choice. Only 21 students in the state of Indiana were awarded this honor. Recipients were judged based upon their leadership through community service, academic achievement, and extracurricular achievement. Way to go, Alex. We are proud of you. Mr. McDaniel also mentioned the Southland community would like to recognize Tom Pinnacle and Carrie Haycraft for their work on the county tournament this year. There was a great deal of planning and revising plans, but students had the opportunity to play basketball over the Christmas holiday. Thank you, Mr. Pinnacle and Mrs. Haycraft. A lot of people involved to make that all work and make it happen. And we're glad it happened. Mrs. Boone, with the CAR program, we wish to recognize and express our gratitude to Kylie Broman, transition coordinator for the CAR program, for the exceptional work she does conducting the onboarding and enrollment process for all students and parents. As a program that offers open enrollment, we are continually enrolling new students from across the state of Indiana. The task of onboarding new students and orientating parents to online learning is a heavy lift. Ms. Broman does an excellent job of connecting with and engaging new families. Additionally, she carries a large caseload of students with whom she facilitates their learning. Ms. Broman works tirelessly to encourage, support, motivate, and connect with students who might otherwise fall through the cracks educationally. We sincerely appreciate Ms. Broman's passion, work ethic, and commitment to the mission of the CAR program. Mr. Snyder at Northfield. Northfield is very proud of senior Emma Brainerd, who was recently announced as the 2021 Lilly Endowment Community Scholarship recipient. This 4-year full tuition college scholarship is given to one Wabash County senior each year who ranks high on 11 criteria, including academic achievement measures, financial need, volunteerism and work ethic, school participation, leadership, essays, and an interview. Congratulations, Emma. NHS is very proud of you for this awesome accomplishment. That was an excellent choice. There are other excellent choices, but they could only choose one. So congratulations to Emma. Let's see what else we have. Mr. Snyder also would like to thank Jason Lyons and Sherman Gray for all their time and dedication to helping get the robotics team up and going this year. They took our team to their first competition on Saturday, just last Saturday, January 9th. These guys do an excellent job of not only teaching students for competition, but also thinking through building and programming in regards to careers. Having 2 professionals like these, that work in the engineering field is an awesome resource and wealth of knowledge for our kids. And Mr. Snyder also threw another one out there. Northwood would like to congratulate the Lady Norse basketball team for winning the 2020 Wabash County basketball tournament. A special shout out to the seniors on the team on winning the tournament each year of their 4-year high school career. I don't know how many that could say they won the county tournament each year, their high school careers. Congratulations on the 4th county tournament. Went to seniors Emma Hoover, Kirsten Stout, Kenzie Bear, Addie Baker, Kyra Kennedy, and Jenna Crum. Addie Baker, Emma Hoover, Kyra Kennedy made the all-county team. Kyra Kennedy was named Wabash County Attorney MVP. Good luck the remainder of the season. If you were there and watched those games, they made them very exciting. That was, I think, I don't want to miss anybody. Yeah, Mr. Boone did put something down. He was also going to be here for the preschool, but he was unable to come. His wife is actually delivering a baby. She's not delivering, but she's helping deliver. Got to be careful what I say there. But we'd like to take this opportunity to thank our elementary sports coaches for the 2020-2021 school year. For girls volleyball, Gina Deaton and Drew Gentry did a great job working with our young ladies to help them come together as a team and improve individual skills. For our current basketball season, Sean Unger, Clint Inyard, and Jesse Hyatt are coaching our boys teams. Adam Weiner and Randy Pershing are leading our girls teams, and we appreciate all of them for juggling work and family obligations, making it possible for one more voice who is encouraging and challenging our students to reach their fullest potential. And so, Mr. Daisy, I believe that's all I have for you.
Well, we're to the point for the public comment. We're still doing Facebook Live, so we'll do the countdown until they catch up here. Scott, you're in charge of finding some sort of theme song to play at this point.
Depends on what age you want.
And that's time.
Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda items. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting on December 8th. A motion and second to approve the minutes from our last board meeting on December 8th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Claims.
I had one or two junk on that. I'm good.
Is that a motion?
Do I have a motion?
So, are you just letting them
Do I have a second to approve the claims? Motion and second to approve claims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? End of year and month balances.
Payroll.
Oh yeah, I got there's two other things there. Payroll. We have two payrolls, it looks like.
Yep, we have two payrolls, last two of the calendar year. And so you can see a difference between the December 15th, December 30th payroll, and that's due to the fact that we issued those teacher appreciation grant dollars that we received from the state out, and then also the ECAs for the first semester for both high schools.
I move the payroll.
Second.
Motion and second to approve payroll. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll stay on that line and go with financial summary then.
Okay. I gave you a lot of information, so I'm not going to go through all of it. Just an opportunity. I wanted to try out some new things just to see what you thought about some of that. Not necessarily that I need to do it every month, but I thought since we were at the end of the year, it'd be good to just kind of show some of those things. So the first is the cash balance report. We usually, typically, for you new board members, we show this report on the first board meeting of the month. So it just shows you the imbalances from the previous month. So for example, this would be not only the imbalances for December, but also the end of 2020. And you can see, like I mentioned earlier, education fund had a $6.1 million balance. And then that little negative $500,000 will eventually have a zero on it after today. So that just kind of shows you all of our different funds and what those balances are in those funds. As you get down towards the bottom, a lot of those funds are federal grants. So typically you will see negatives in there because those are always paid in arrears. We pay those out, and then once we pay those out, then we have to seek reimbursement from the government to get those monies back. So that's why those are in the negatives. Education fund. We usually do a cash flow sheet, usually give you a cash flow spreadsheet on the second board meeting of the month to reflect the previous month as well. So this obviously, since it was the end of December, would reflect all of the 2020 school year. So you can kind of see how funds change month to month, in what categories and what areas. And then we use those trends and so forth to make projections for 2021. So currently I am working on projections of the education fund for 2021. The next is just the previous year's cash flow. If you wanted to compare, you have that option. This is something new. I thought I would throw it out there because a lot of it's more visual. Just kind of gives you an idea of what those trends have been in the past compared to what actuals are for revenues and expenditure and expenses. And then it kind of gives you a picture of what those fund balances were each month, which kind of see that from the cash flow, but this is more of a visual perspective. That compares it to the previous year from month to month for the education fund.
Pretty.
Right? Colorful.
Lots of colors.
This is a dashboard that this one represents the revenue. And so the thing I like about it is it kind of shows your comparisons of appropriations to expenditure, to forecasts and actuals. It gives you a top 10 of what your top 10 revenue sources were for that year or that month, if this was something that was done on a monthly basis. And then it kind of gives you that comparison of what the budget was to what the actuals are and what the current was if you compare that from a month-to-month basis. So that's looking at it from a revenue standpoint. This is also being shown as a revenue standpoint. It kind of gives you an idea of where your trends, if they're favorable or not. Gives you a comparison from previous years, if you wanted to look at month to month from a previous year, or year to date from a previous year. Kind of gives you that breakdown. The next one is the same dashboard, except this is for expenses. So it gives you the top 10 expenses out of the education fund for that year, with those similar comparisons to appropriations and actuals for that time period. In this case, that would be the whole year. With a similar graph here that shows expenses, you can look at, December expenses and how they compared from month to month from previous years. And so that gives you a little different perspective. Again, maybe not something that you care to see from a month-to-month relation, but something that I look at. Also helps me make my adjustments. And then this was something that kind of just explains that report, all broken down, gives a little bit of analysis of what some of the variances were in the education fund related to revenues and expenses, from what we budgeted out to what the actuals were and what some of those areas of increases or decreases occurred in. So just something to add to that. The next one is operations fund. So similar thing here, give you a representation of a cash flow from month to month and where those expenses and revenues flow in and out of each month. And that will lead to trends for projections. The next one shows 2019. If you wanted to compare how 2020 looked to 2019, you can always go back and forth and do that. And then, again, similar graph here. You can really see a spike in certain times of balances. And that's because when you're dealing with your taxed funds, the main source of revenue in our operation is our tax dollars. And so we only get our tax dollars twice a year. So we get them in June and we get them in December. And so that's where you see the spike and increase. So essentially those tax dollars last us for the 6 months because you start to see it decrease because we don't have as much revenue coming in, but we still have all of our expenses. And then you get a spike increase because we get our tax draw. So that's where you see those, that's why you see those jumps in there. And then we don't have to go through all this dashboards for revenue and expenses compared. Any questions with the cash flow slides? I know it's a lot of information, something that you can look at on your free time or call if you have questions about any of it. I don't think I'll give that large amount of information from a month-to-month perspective, but it is available. And it is something that I look at each time and make adjustments accordingly when we're going through our projections.
Chris, shout out to you again, Chris, and you guys should pick up on that. You're in projection in line with the final. It's like there. So,
It's really good.
good job.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the first, what was the educational fund, the rental, the line item on the top 10, what falls under the rental expense?
Can you go back to that, Mike?
I mean, everything else makes sense.
I think the major rental fee that we have that comes out of the education fund is our contract agreement with White's.
Okay.
That we rent part of. We don't own that facility that they educate the students in, so we rent that facility, and so that's the cost there, and so that $210,000 is the White's rent.
Okay.
Now we may have some other things, but they're not even closely associated with that. That's the big chunk of it. Now make Mike go all the way back through.
Carpet tunnel.
Okay. One of the things that we'll approve tonight is a resolution that determines the amount of money that we transfer from our education fund to our operations fund. And this all occurred, for you new guys, this all occurred in 2019 when they changed our fund structures. And they got rid of the general fund and they created the education fund, and they got rid of the capital projects and bus replacement transportation, and they created the operations fund. Well, some of the same expenses that were in the general fund, they moved out of the general fund and put into operations without any revenue. And so because of that, they allow school corporations to transfer money out of their education fund to cover those expenses that used to be out of that fund. And so they allow schools to do that, but they cap it at 15%. So you're not allowed to transfer more than 15% of your revenue into operations. And so this document then just shows that breakdown of the different categories that used to be paid out of education fund. So like the support services used to be paid out of education fund. The central service used to be paid out of education fund. The operation and maintenance services used to be paid out of education fund. Now they're paid out of operation. So we transfer money out of the education fund to cover those expenses because that's how it was working beforehand. And so that maps that all out, and the bottom line is this year we transferred 12.48% of our education revenue over into operations to cover those costs. Does that all kind of make sense?
And as a comparison, that's a very good figure. There are schools when Dr. Kuhn says that it's not allowed to go over 15%. Some schools will go over 15%, but then they will be basically documented in saying that they were.
They have to document, they have to do some documents of why they're going over, how they're going to fix it, those type of things, so that they can maintain 15%. So it's not like it's a punishment, but you have, it's kind of like an audit. You have to get your problems fixed to some degree. And so where they came up with 15%, nobody really knows, but that was the magic number. And so,
And originally, when they did this, it was supposed to be flexibility for schools. And it was flexibility, but then they actually then put this
then they capped it.
regulation in, so.
The other slides that go with that are just a similar breakdown. This would be if we transferred the exact amount of dollars from month to month. So if we were to transfer the exact amount to cover those costs, it would have been 11.4%. But what we do is we just do a monthly amount, and we set that monthly amount through that resolution, and then we just make our adjustments as needed, so that we can just manage it a little bit easier. And then that's just the entire number breakdown by each category. You don't really need to worry about that.
Okay.
That's all I had as far as my financial end of the year summary.
Moving on to personnel. Under employment, we have Danielle Renbarger, paraprofessional at Metro North, effective December 15th. Shelley Grump, paraprofessional at Sharp Creek Elementary, effective beginning of this semester. Randy Pershing, Southwood Elementary 5th grade girls basketball coach for the winter season. Under leave, we have number 115, leave to continue through the end of the school year. And retirement, Danielle Snyder, teacher at Southwood High School. That'll be effective at the end of this school year.
And if I could just mention something about Mr. Snyder. Mr. Snyder put his retirement in, I think it was just Monday. It was after this already came out. That's why we put the revision. I asked him if he wanted me to go ahead and put it on now or later. He said it was up to us. So I thought I'd go ahead and put it in there. But just a great teacher, but even more importantly, a great person that works in the community, builds relationships, and going to be a really tough person to, for somebody to take his position, because he's done a great job, and we appreciate him and all the years that he served at Southwood. Also Southwood alum, and we'll miss him and wish him well in retirement.
Football program's gonna miss him too.
Make the motion except for Mr. Snipes.
Yeah.
No, I'll move to approve, unfortunately.
Second.
Motion and second to approve personnel as read. All in favor, say aye.
I did, one thing I did ask him, he does some stock car racing, so I asked him if I was gonna see him at the Brickyard, but he said probably not the Brickyard.
I think his racing kept him employed for 1 or 2 more years.
Yes.
Seems like there's always a transmission that needed to be replaced.
Moving on to reports, Heartland Career Center. Do you have anything, Matt?
No, before we'll have a meeting next week.
Okay.
Unless Mike's got something about, they'll give us some more information about the funding.
About the funding grant?
But there is a lot, I guess I would say though, there's a lot of excitement with that moving. It's gonna take some time, but there is a lot of excitement with the donations that have come through, over $800,000 of the $1 million that we needed to raise. So there's just a lot of excitement for the community and for all of our students and for adult learners too, to be able to participate in that. So with a federal grant, there's a lot of things that you have to follow, and it's going to take some time, but it'll happen. So.
As the funds that are raised, Matt, does that decrease our commitment as a district then?
Yes, yeah.
Well,
Because we were kind of guaranteeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we still may have to do some, but not to the.
Extend what it was.
Yeah.
That's
I
great.
think we were on the hook for 27% of whatever was left that wasn't raised.
And some of the donors are like 4 or 5 years out too, so we'll have to figure some of that out also, as far as.
Kind of stage.
Yeah, but the largest donation, I think, is just the one time, so that's good. But there's other smaller ones that said that they would do a certain amount, like I said, 4 or 5 years, so they're working on that too, so.
Mr. Kiefer, if I could add, I think everybody here knows this. I've served as a high school principal in 3 different districts with all 3 different vocational schools. And I can tell you the leadership at Heartland Career Center is by far the best leadership of any career center I've ever worked with. They do a fantastic job, and they are to be commended.
And they're working with Wabash to
Yep.
do a welding class.
Yes, they are starting this semester. The one that, I don't know what his name is, but he's coming out to campus after school hours at Heartland to work with a cohort of kids at White's to work on some welding skills. That's right. Really excited about that.
And they'd like to add a lot of different programs. It just takes time, but it's
Yeah.
nice. They also have, not through White, or not through Heartland Career Center, but they have another program that they're doing, since you brought that up, is the CNA program that they're doing too, so.
Yep, Magnolia Health.
Yes.
I think it's a connection that Ron Evans has with somebody in Indianapolis, but we just had our first cohort of kids last month that did some CNA training with Magnolia Health, and then they'll also do their contact hours as well, with the idea that once those kids leave White's, because Magnolia Health has nursing homes all across northern Indiana, I'm told. And so they would offer all those kids that get their certification a job in whatever community they might return to. So it's really it's a great deal for some of our kids.
Superintendent's report, Mr. Kefeber.
Yes, so last year started with the review of 2019, and this year I just want to do a review of 2020, have some slides here. I haven't shown these to you yet because it is a presentation. I'll go pretty quickly on it though. One thing I was going to do is just say COVID-19 and just make it one slider. But just to go back and recap, there's a lot of things that we could say as far as the schools. This is not necessarily school related, but it's more or less, so maybe the corporation. This first one is in January. One thing I put a highlight, Josh Moore was approved as the athletic director at Northfield Junior Senior High School. February, the Tim Tebow's Night of Shine, if you remember that, that was really a neat thing that it used to be at Honeywell and it was at Northfield. It was going to be maybe at Northfield or Southwood this next year, but because of COVID, that changed. Yes, it has changed because they haven't done anything with it. And then the strategic plan update. Of course, we had those informational presentations in February, right before COVID started at Northfield and Southwood. And then we had swimmer Grant Dale placed 29th in the state meet in his event. In March, I guess I don't need to read all these to you, but I will. The 6 robotic teams that competed at Lucas Oil Stadium. And that was right there, really on the verge of the pandemic, right before we closed everything down. Of course, the kindergarten roundup was the last community events for the school year prior to the shutdown. COVID-19, Friday the 13th. Wow, unbelievable day. Started the meal program, donated needed supplies to healthcare facilities. I know Mrs. Moore went through some other places. I took some different places because we weren't in school. We had supplies. That was the big situation. They needed the PPE and they didn't have it. And so we were able to donate. You saw the donations that we get all the time, but it was really nice to be able to reciprocate and be able to do that also for other healthcare facilities. The 160 school day rule, I put that down just because that was really just unbelievable as far as what happened, because it's 180 days. The last year was 160. Of course, in April, just the 1st of April, that was very early on, how many meals that we served, 30,521. A lot of people doing a lot of things with the meals. Everybody got involved, and then when we went to the different 9 locations, or 8 delivery dates, or those were 8 delivery dates up to that point, but there were 9 different locations. Of course, then because of the pandemic, we had the required the continuous learning plan that we had to complete, and it was approved. And then if we, I don't know if Dr. Coons wants to spend a lot of time on it. Oh no, don't tell me this isn't going to work. What just happened?
He took over that too.
Oh well. What just happened? I'm supposed to push that and it's supposed to play, because it did. But basically, I'll just say that we're all in this together. This was just a teacher at Sharp Creek Elementary actually put this together, and it was just kind of a really combination of a lot of different things that were happening as far as saying that we miss you, and there are a lot of people involved in that, and it's a video. I'll probably throw it out to you on an update so you can see it, because it's not very long, but it's pretty neat. The homeschool policies were actually approved by you as a board for Heartland Career Center and Athletics, and that was the first time ever that we had that situation. In May of 2020, a new events passed out caps and gowns via drive-by delivery, kind of something new. Staff and senior signed secret distribution. That was fun. Student device drop off and pick up of personal items. We had to do that because of COVID. And then, of course, we had the 27-member COVID-19 pandemic re-entry task force team. That's hard to say. met for the first time, getting ready for school. And then, of course, the board started approving all kinds of reentry plans. You started out with the athletic reentry plan. We had the senior parades. Those were really neat. In July, you had the MSD County reentry plan. Then it was revised. Jay Snyder was approved as Northfield principal. Joe Martin was approved as a Sharp Creek principal. Northfield and Southwood finally had their graduations in July. And then, of course, they had proms. MSD, we went to the fair again, but it was a lot smaller. Probably didn't know we were there because we were tucked in that. It was a nice place, but that's all happened. We went to the virtual option. Face coverings was a big topic. We had the vigil for Dakota, who was killed, and one of our students, just a tragic thing. 85 staff members participated in iPad training. In August, you could see MSD reentry plan revised again. Then right away, right when we did it, the ISDH released new data and we had to do something different. You also did the event management plan. We did start school in August. The second refresh of student devices, iPads, 9th year to be one-to-one school district. That's kind of hard to believe, but this is the second refresh but the 9th year. We received 4,200 masks. That was the first time we had a distribution. We actually had it again, so we've received 8,400 masks. 6% of our traditional student population started virtual education. MSD started being on This Week in Wabash, and we've been there every week. We're the only school district in Wabash County that does that on a weekly basis. 31 teachers provided instruction for virtual only students from August to December. This is kind of interesting. All 7th grade students for the first time participated in that Wabash River Defenders Wild field trip. USDA offered free breakfast and lunch to all students. So pretty big there. October, the teacher contract. We appreciate everybody working on that. That was approved. Braden Sweet ran in the cross-country state meet, placing 30th. Southwood football team broke a TRC record of 27 consecutive wins in the TRC. In November, implemented a healthcare assistance program with the United Fund Community Foundation of Wabash County. Challenges continue with COVID-19, as you know. Live event streaming started. So not just here, we do this. We've done this for a lot of years now, but in our gyms. And in December, we invited Senator Andrew Zay and Representative Snow. We're invited to attend a meeting with the administrators, our advocates, and also teacher representatives. We had the reception of the outgoing school board members. Also, challenges improved by the end of the semester. Virtual for second semester. I say 26 students. It's really a little closer to maybe 30 students, but some of them are students that are in our RISE classrooms. And anyway, that's kind of a highlight. Unfortunately, a lot of that is about COVID. I went back to 2019. If you guys remember, we did this in 2019. There are a lot of things that we began in 2019. We didn't have to react to something like we did with COVID. But we hope to see more things coming in 2021. Some additional highlights. We talked about the funding. I actually went back. Last year was like 75,000. It was 28,000, but most of it was just the first 3 months because of the year before the pandemic. There were several work sessions to discuss strategic planning. Of course, all those grants that were in this year, I say 2021, but it's really in 2020. I don't know why I put 21 there. But all the ones that you've already seen, a lot of competitive grants that were earned. Also, probably people get a little tired of all the messages, but about 140 messages to parents through School Messenger in 2020. And typically we don't do that many unless it's about fog, ice, or snow, but there's a lot about COVID. Fund balances are improving and stabilizing. Self-insurance to ourselves is falling off by early 2021, and debt. And Dr. Kuhn already talked about all that. MSD is moving forward and continuing to improve student learning. And there's our plan there. I'm just going to skip those two for time. And 2021, here we come. So a lot of things happen. Just to recap pretty quickly.
All right.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Drake, curriculum and instruction report.
I think Mike pretty much covered all the stuff I would talk about, so
Okay.
I'll forfeit my time.
Okay. We have a lot of items under new business, and I think each of them deserve their own time, so we're just going to vote on each one of them independently. Recommendation to approve the 2021 budget reduction resolution from our 1782 notice.
So we kind of went over that in our financial report. We just kind of have to approve that 1782 notice to some degree, so we have to approve what those new budget appropriations
So if we
are.
say no, do we go back to getting what we asked for?
No, unfortunately not. We get what we get.
Good question.
I do that, I was just hopeful. Thought maybe the rules
Keep
changed.
your fingers crossed.
Do I have a motion to approve that?
I'll move to approve the budget reduction resolution.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the budget reduction resolution for our 1782 notice. All in favor, say aye. Recommendation to approve the local income tax distribution resolution.
So the state, we receive local income tax dollars from the county. The state requires us, State Board of Accounts requires us to determine where that revenue goes and how it's distributed. And so basically what we do is, because it's a tax related revenue, we do have the operation of putting it, or the option of putting it into our education fund, but we usually keep it in line with our other tax revenue funds, which means we split that income tax distribution between our operations and our debt service. And we split it based off of the percent difference between the tax rate for operations and debt service. And so that local income tax distribution then gets put into those two funds.
I move for the resolution. Second.
Motion and second to approve the resolution for the local income tax distribution. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Here's the one I like. Recommendation to approve the rainy day transfer to the self-insurance fund.
I almost put $500,000 and $1 just so we would have a 1 in that column, but a 0 would be nice too.
I always said we were gonna have a party when we did
Yeah.
that. It crept up on me, so with great pleasure, I approved the resolution to transfer rainy day fund.
Second.
A motion and second to approve the rainy day transfer to the self-insurance fund, paying that thing off. Hallelujah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chris, will that still be listed then?
I mean, it will be, at some point we can inactivate it, but it's just a fund that we have and it'll always be in our history, so.
Recommendation to approve the disbursements from education fund to operations fund.
So, this year I anticipated a $2.1 million transfer, which would equate to be about $175,000 a month. And that's just the cap of it. So it's not to exceed $175,000. We're currently doing $165,000. I actually probably will even reduce that a little bit more. So I'm looking at starting at maybe $155,000 for monthly, and then just adjust as needed, not to exceed $175,000. If it ever got to that point, then we would have to do another resolution.
I move to approve the resolution.
Motion and second to approve the disbursements resolution to disperse from education to operations fund. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
A recommendation to approve the resolution authorizing the treasurer to pay claims.
So our board meetings are the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. We usually approve claims on those board meetings, but in the rare occasion that we cancel board meetings or don't have a board meeting, this would just allow us to continue our operations, and then you would approve those claims at the following board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the resolution authorizing the treasurer to pay claims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Recommendation to approve the COVID additional leave resolution. You want to speak to that, Mike?
Yeah, so the Family First Act expired on December 31st, 2020. And so we wanted to make sure that because of quarantine and things that happened with our staff members, that they would not have a pay loss. So this basically outlines that. And so if we go down to the therefores, it talks about it. But I'll just read it so everybody knows and make sure we understand all this. So it is not renewed in the second semester of the 2020-21 school year. The MSD of Wabash County shall be entitled to additional sick leave days for absences which are attributable to exposure arising during the employee's performance of his duties on MSD of Wabash County Schools campus and to meet the following guidelines. So it's determined that the employee contacted COVID-19 virus or was exposed to the COVID-19 virus at the school district places the employee on quarantine isolation due to the school contact tracing, and the staff members has exhausted all of his or her cumulative leave days. If the staff member has no leave days, then the staff member will receive 10 days in the second semester for absences outlined in this policy. And then that would be expire on June 30th of 2021. And so basically, if they're quarantined by us because it's a close contact and it happened at school, then they would use their leave days. If they don't have leave days, then we would give them up to 10 days. And you have to recall now that we have the 10-day quarantine instead of the 14-day quarantine. It would really never be 10 days because of the weekends, things like that. So, but that doesn't mean they could not be quarantined for the second or third time, like some people understand and have had those experiences, unfortunately.
But it has to be determined that the employee was exposed at a school or school function.
Yes.
Yeah, if that's the intent, we probably need to clean it up a little bit because it does read just as that they were exposed at the actual school, not a function or something. So I think if that's the intent, I'm happy to take a stab at cleaning some of that up.
Okay.
And I think Mike, the shall that you read is not actually in there, so should read shall be entitled.
Okay. I should have blown it up a little bit. The font was pretty small on my screen when I was reading it. So do we want to have a motion to accept it?
Pending slight revisions to make sure it applies to employees' performance of their duties, not limited strictly to the campus. I think is probably what the intention is.
Yeah, that is the intention.
I'll make a motion to approve it upon revision. Second.
Motion and second to approve the COVID additional leave resolution upon revision from Josh. I'm just gonna say it easy.
That's fine.
That's an easy one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So I just have a question then, Josh. So is it all right for us to implement this then until we get it signed? Like, we'll need to get a new paper back and signed, but is it okay to go ahead and implement it?
Yeah, I think that with you resolving to do it pending these changes, that should be fine.
Okay.
So tonight, we will not be signing this one because it doesn't have the changes, but we will sign it when you bring us the new one. All right, recommendation to approve an overnight extended trip for Southwood seniors to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg on April 18th and 21st.
And just to talk about that a little bit, we don't know for sure what's going to happen in April. And so when we start talking about these field trips, I did talk to Mr. McDaniel and the sponsor and just say that, number one, if you approve this tonight, it is approved, but that doesn't mean that we can't cancel it prior to the event. And we'd also have to follow all COVID-19 protocol that's been given to us. So those would be the stipulations with that. They just have to know that it can be canceled. And probably we always know anything can be canceled after last year. A lot of things were canceled. So, but they're looking, a lot of it would be outside. Of course, they would be on a bus, so they're not going to have social distancing, but we don't have social distancing on our buses now. So that's why I went ahead and approved it. But of course, you as a board have to officially approve it also, if they go so.
I move to approve the field trip for Southwood.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the field trip for Southwood to Pigeon Forge. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Recommendation to approve the Little Norse and Little Knights 3-year-old school preschool program.
Yep, so I put the proposal and the goal. There's a lot of information here I gave you, and also gave you a little bit about the 2018, the dashboard for the Wabash County profile. I basically could go over all this, or you can ask questions. I have Mrs. Moore said that she would come too to be able to answer any questions too that you might have. Tried to outline a little bit more. In general, we gave you some ideas of what we were thinking, and we started some of this conversation. Well, we started it several months ago, but more officially in October, and then putting out some of those surveys to find out if there's any interest, because if there's no interest, obviously we would not pursue anything, but there was interest in that. And so try to outline all of the different things that would occur because of this. And just, if you have any questions, open up for questions right now.
What's our goal for number? You guys have a number that you'd like to see?
Yeah, so we did say like the minimum, right now, the ratio is 1 to 10 for the 3-year-olds. So we were still hoping for 16 to 18 would be a goal for a classroom. But what we said was, do we start, and that's a question that we have too, Kevin, though, would we go with 10? And that's something that we have to determine, but we were talking about if we had that minimum of 10, then we would go with it, so.
I was thinking more the other way, like, would you be willing to do 2 classrooms and then?
Oh, yeah.
How does that space work out?
Yeah, so at Metro North Elementary, some of the discussion would be if we needed extra room, then there would be a possibility of shuffling some students from Metro North Elementary. In other words, even doing possibly a 3rd grade going to Sharp Creek, to Sharp Creek.
So moving the 3rd grade.
Moving the 3rd grade to have
As a
room.
possibility.
As a possibility, yes.
We can move around the kindergartners. I mean, what kind of room are you looking for? You got these and you got those, but you're going to.
Yeah, these, I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a 3rd grader, he like looks down on me, so we're keep on both sides of. We would definitely look at both buildings, what are the needs of our students? And then make adjustments to meet all of those needs.
I'm thinking restrooms and
Yes.
that kind of stuff.
Fee structures based on need.
Yes,
Like-
exactly
Same
like
as
our
our 4-year-olds.
Exactly like our 4-year-olds.
Which is reduced,
Uh-huh.
all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have 3 different fee structures, the full pay, and then if they're on reduced lunches, textbook assistance, or if they're free.
You guys know where I come from all the time, it seems like, and that's the kids that can't go to some other place, yet we can't prioritize that, you have to be open across the board, right?
Right.
So,
And that's why when we talk about the financial part, we don't know necessarily, are we going to get all of them at the different, is it going to be a combination of all the different fee structures, or all the lowest ones, the middle ones, or high ones? So Chris did put some of those things together as far as what it could look like, but we wouldn't know until we actually had those students that would enroll or apply, I guess.
And we do pursue all kinds of alternative funding. Both buildings are a part of the On My Way Pre-K grant, which just applies to our 4-year-olds. Families, and they've opened up the eligibility a little bit more this year. If I meet eligibility requirements and I have a job outside of the home, then my child goes to Metro North if I've done all the paperwork, and it pays us in full, and then some.
And when you say in full and then some, no, it's higher than the rate that we've
Correct,
set.
so higher than a little bit more than our highest rate. And the other opportunity that we have, in addition to the On My Way Pre-K, and our 3-year-olds would also qualify for this, is that we would qualify for CCDF funding, which is a voucher program. And that again is based on income, has those same sort of requirements that parents have to be either working, and same for On My Way Pre-K, working or enrolled in some sort of continuing education. So those are also available, and we help connect parents with that. In fact, I sent that to a parent this afternoon, that they've had a change in their income structure at home, And so she was applying tonight to help, which would offset our costs for this current school year, because her child is enrolled at Mature North in preschool. The Community Foundation has offered a couple scholarships to students in the past that has helped offset a bit. Trying to think of what else we've looked at as well. They have opened up that eligibility in the past for On My Way Pre-K. It has not included grandparents raising grandchildren, and they now make that available, which I think is huge. And we have several, I think I have 2 of my On My Way Pre-K kiddos whose grandparents are raising them, who would not have been able to attend preschool because of the financial strain. So,
We're all aware of that gap, you could say, between those kids that had the opportunity to go into preschool, enter kindergarten. So I just like to see the disadvantaged all the time.
and we pursue those. Those that we know typically are with younger siblings, we call them to get them connected. And then, through the grapevine, find other kids that may not have had that opportunity. And we know in the community, our early childhood opportunities are dwindling, and it's because of the costs. There's an immense cost with running a daycare and just early childhood programming. The expense is huge, and they are typically the most underpaid employees that you will find.
That's pretty well the way my son, who's involved in this, sums it up. He feels like you're overcharging and underpaying at the same time. It's a tension, a conflict all the time.
And we don't have enough spots in our community. I think on average in the county, bring in 350 kindergarten students. There are 250 early education spots. And so we know it's even more for our 3-year-olds.
I take it you're excited for the task of adding more to your management plate.
I think at one point I said my office has a restroom, so, if we need to.
10 of them could be in your.
We knocked out a wall. We have-
We discover.
That's right.
Now that you,
The whole area.
So how does transportation, is that all parents?
On 3-year-olds.
On
Yes.
3-year-olds, it would be yes.
Okay. 4-year-olds isn't?
No,
No.
4-year-olds, we transport them.
We transport.
We give them that option, I guess.
Because obviously that becomes, usually some of the disadvantage, you're probably not gonna,
Yes.
especially if someone's at work, going to work, they don't have 2 vehicles, it's probably not gonna happen.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering about.
And our 4-year-olds are also, I think it's important to know, buckled in. They're in a
I've seen that, I guess, on those
a
buses.
special seat. So.
I thought that was for my kids.
They get padlocked in.
now that you've had it a couple of years, have you seen the growth from those kids going into kindergarten being more ready?
Yes. And I wish our kindergarten teachers were here to speak of that. Because
Okay.
just from the first day in the cafeteria alone is huge, because they know how to carry a tray, which you think that's not a big deal. It's a huge deal if you've never had to balance something before. But our, pre-Kers by the end of the 2nd week have got that mastered. And then you throw into this year, they're sitting every other seat in the same spot every day. They've had that mastered within the first couple weeks as well. So just navigating the cafeteria is huge, and it's time that our kindergarten teachers don't have to spend, where they can focus on academics in the first few weeks of school and getting to know, more importantly, getting to know students. But yes, greatly impacts their academics.
Good.
So,
You would think so.
yes, yes. Our first group right now is in 2nd grade. And so it's exciting to watch how they've grown.
Any
Is
other
there a-
discussion?
recommendation, do we make a motion to this?
Yeah, this is a recommendation that we would want you to go ahead and make a motion if you so determined to do that.
The final decision based upon final interest.
Yeah,
And we're doing this kindergarten roundup kind of thing,
right.
or
Yeah.
separate.
Well, it'll be separate, but it'll be similar to what we've done last year with the fourth grade, or not fourth grade, the 4-year-olds. So yes. And the timeline would be, if you would approve it tonight, we would go ahead and start advertising. And then in March, we would get those numbers just like we do with the 4-year-olds and just like we do with kindergarten roundup. Kindergarten roundup, we're looking at, we used to have a community kindergarten roundup. Because of COVID and other reasons, we're going to be in the schools this year. But then that will give some more flexibility with our preschool programs too, so.
I'm not sure if this is in the information something, but I think it's something to also note, is that our staff with students of that age group are also involved, and I think that's an amazing benefit to offer our teachers and our support staff, and it's just a great benefit to have.
No, that wasn't in there. That is good. Thank you.
I move to approve the Little North and Little Lights 3-year-old program.
Second.
A motion and second to approve the Little Knights and Little North programs to include 3-year-olds this year. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? No unfinished business, board policy, and we'll go to public comment, and here's where Scott's got to provide us some music.
Well, there are actually 2 questions waiting.
And since he had, and while we wait though, I do want to say, I had a sticky note and I put it on the wrong device here. But on the update or on the 2020, we did have the car graduations. Were the first time in that year. And so we had one in February and August, and not just the graduations at Northfield Southfield, but our credit alternative recovery program. And those are very special too. And we made those happen in August too during the pandemic, but it was done outside and a lot of fun. So maybe I stalled a little bit there. I was going to sing if Scott didn't have the music.
I was actually going to ask you to dance.
Oh, yeah.
So the first question,
Tim has a couple questions that come in on Facebook.
the first question was, where can you find the documentation of districts that went over the 15% transfer rate?
Duet?
Right now, they're still, I believe they're gonna start collecting that information when we submit our Form 9s. They haven't really decided on where that information is going to be located. There has been talk that it would be added to the DUAB fiscal indicators. There has been talk that it might get added to the InView, which is that breakdown of all the school districts. They have talked about putting it on the Indiana Department of Education website. So there's not been really any distinct determination at this point. I think they just really, right now, they're just into that phase of starting to track it. And so that's, we're reporting it on Form 9 and that type of stuff now, so.
Ask us again in a few months.
The second question is, what % of students are virtual now?
Percent?
Well, I think you said just
Well,
26 students, right?
Yeah, well, we'll say the 30 because of the RISE program, so.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2,100.
Well, 2,030.
Oh, would you do enrollment? You do enrollment though, wouldn't you?
2,100.
So roughly 1%.
Yeah, 1 to 2%.
Yeah, it's 30%, so, or 30 people.
30 people, we're
I was
looking
gonna do the exact.
at 1 to 2%.
Both those questions came from the Ridgeways, and they wanted to also list that they were celebrating, when they say, they said they're celebrating this, I think they mean the insurance, paying off the self-insurance program, so I wanted to share that too.
Yep.
That's it?
1.4, 28757.
Florida.
I know.
So it's easy for them to celebrate.
Oh, yeah.
All right, items from board members. We'll jump back into what Mike had suggested could be under other in our reorganization meeting on whether or not, what we think about meeting times and 6 o'clock still works okay for me, but
My thoughts on the frequency has always been a hybrid of some kind. Heading into the start of the school year, we needed to make more approvals. maybe stretch out the June, July time period. Not very frequent. You guys know business as well as anybody.
It would just be required, it would just require at some points, or sometimes we may have to have special meetings for certain things.
There isn't a law that you have to have it based on a frequency that's consistent.
No,
It just has to be advertised.
Law for that, you just have to advertise it whenever you can have as many as you want, or
When we've discussed this in the past, we always felt like the more often we met, we felt we were more engaged and we stayed current with stuff. You know, we had a good information flow and transfer, but I know it wears you out too. 2 weeks comes around pretty quick.
that's not about us. I mean, it's whatever's gonna get the information
But
that
for
you
you
guys
guys,
need.
I mean, every 2 weeks now might be
good.
good.
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm always like to be efficient with our time though too, so if we're not accomplishing anything in our meetings that can be done on a monthly basis, then, you know, I'm for less meeting though too, so if you guys see a time of the year, obviously you guys have been in it longer than we have. If there's time that you know that you need to have two, then let's schedule that, but if we can go down to.
Like terrain planning and. parks.
Yeah. And he's right up right now. So April, May, September, October, November.
I could see that, but I also think, especially because of the two new guys, that I remember, I mean, it's been 6 years ago now, and I'm just now really starting to feel like I got a good handle on what we're doing. So there's a decent learning curve, so I'm gonna suggest that we
Todd, I
probably
don't
stay
have
with two for a while.
any handle on it yet. I've got a ton of dumb questions to ask.
Yeah.
If I wasn't too proud.
Well, I at least especially had to relearn it in 2019, when we did the new Operation and Education Fund, but I can at least understand the terms now when we're starting to have these discussions.
I personally don't have a problem with every 2 weeks, but I know it increases the preparation load for the administrators and.
Yeah. I guess what my position would be is that I agree that, you know, there's some times that it probably could be once a month, but if we need to, you know, if the schedule permits that we feel like we've got a pretty good handle for that month, then maybe we can go ahead and take the second one off. But I think it's important as many times as we can, at least for this year, to go with the two.
Can I throw out a proposal with a little bit about what Kevin said and about what you said and everybody has said, as far as maybe looking at one in June or July, and December we typically only have one too. And in October, we used to have one if, it just depended on where fall break landed. If fall break landed, even though we're still sometimes here, sometimes we're not here, but we would have one or not have one, so.
So how far out do you have to schedule? Or you need to do the whole year?
We schedule out the whole year, but then you can just cancel. I mean, just as easy as canceling one.
It'd be nice to cancel though a little bit ahead of time too, though, for the planning purposes too, so. But I'll put something together and put it in an update and then we can put it on the board agenda too if we want to. If you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to either.
Oh, I don't care.
I'll throw some things out, if that's okay.
I'm not opposed to going to one a month, but I think more often than not, we probably should still do two.
I would hate to do one a month for the whole year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, an occasional month here and there, I don't have a problem with one a month.
I'll throw some things
Does
out.
6
It's
o'clock?
better than so whatever you wanna do.
Tuesday's okay, I mean, whatever works best for you.
Yeah, you got it.
6 o'clock still work okay, or we want to go to 6:30, we want to go to 4:30? No, not 4:30.
6 in the morning work okay with you guys, or?
You said breakfast.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Good too, I like mornings.
I like mornings.
6 o'clock then, is that?
All right.
6.
All right.
AM or PM?
PM.
Okay.
What is this AM you speak of?
He doesn't want any public.
Oh, I didn't say that, I'm a morning person.
Yeah, there'll be no public comment if we do it the way. All right, anything else? Welcome to the new guys. Welcome, look forward to working with you. We're good.
Yeah, A little longer than normal.
Jeff, this is more